The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Ask Ev Kung. I just love that we were talking before about the fact that we have not done this in a hot minute.
It's been so long.
And especially in person, we think it's been at least 5 years.
Yeah.
Which is way too long.
It's been
Like,
too long.
What is that craziness? But we're so excited that you guys are here today. If you're tuning in and you're like, wait a second, this looks different. What's going on here? Normally, this is the time in the day that is reserved only for Ask Dr. Doreen. But for the next 2 weeks, we needed to let Dr. Grampy Shea be someplace else. And we wish her all the best in her someplace else's, because every once in a while, she needs to have that too,
Yes,
right?
she does.
So important. But what we used to do back in the day when we didn't have Dr. Grampy Shea is that we would ask Evelyn Kung to be with us. And she is a wonderful autism expert. And since we weren't going to have Dr. Grampy Shea, I was like, let me ask. And you said that you would, and I know you're super busy right now, but I'm so excited to have you here. You have been working in this field for how many hundreds of years?
Yes, it's been 30-something years when the rate of autism was 1 in 10,000.
Wow. I mean, that was
while
talk
ago.
about it being a minute ago. That was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And over the years, you have been such a light in our community, helping so many people. You used to travel and go to far-flung places. Now you're kind of like Buddha, and we all run to you with questions, right?
It's funny.
Well, it's true though, and we're so excited that we have you here to fill in and answer questions in your own right. And we hope that you guys will start writing in. We're live right now. Today is, I always have to look for the date. It's Tuesday, May 14th. How did that happen already? And it's 2024. I'm still having
not
a problem
ready.
with that. I'm writing 2021 on things. You don't write checks anymore, but things that I have to sign. I'm like 2021. It is not 2021. It's 2024. In any case, we're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other places. Our fabulous Chris Desmond is going to show you some of the different ways that you can be watching the show, some of the different ways that you can participate. Don't forget, our chat is open live. Taryn is already with us, writing in. So is Andrea. We're so thrilled that you guys are here with us. Like them, you can be writing in right now in the chat. That way you can be talking with me and with Evelyn Kung. Stop, it's just too good. So also want to let you know that the show will be available as a podcast, audio only podcast. I can say it, it's a mouthful. Wherever you get your podcast later on today, it is a free download. I hope that you will enjoy and embrace the advertisements that will play that make it a free download for you. If that is bugging you because you're running and you're like, hey, I just don't need the ads, I'd be willing to pay a little bit. We do have that option available for you. You can go to glow.fm/autism-live. It is $5 a month. It's actually even cheaper if you do it for the entire year, because they charge us every time they run your credit card number. And when they don't have to do that only once, we pass that savings on to you. We're trying to make it as low cost for you and the way that you want it, however you want it. So go to glow.fm/autism-live if you want it ad free. By the way, you can get everything that the Autism Network does. You will get everything the Autism Network does by subscribing to that one thing for $5 a month. That's Autism Live, that's Ask Dr. Doreen, that's Ask Evelyn Kung, it's Let's Talk Movies, even our new shows. So make sure if you want that one low cost for everything there. Also love to invite you to check out our library of videos on our 2 YouTube channels now, Ask Dr. Doreen and Autism Live. There are 2 different channels there now. We've got 14 years worth of videos.
Amazing.
It is amazing.
It's really amazing.
It's my late life work. Right? It was not everything that I did before because I had a life before, but in my late life, this is my work. We're also saying good morning to Susie B. We're so thrilled that you guys are here with us. Our topic today with Evelyn Kung, our overreaching topic is motor skills. We have a couple of questions about that. We also have a bunch of questions that Marina has sent in to us. And you guys know, if you write to Ask Dr. Doreen, if you go on the website there is a place where you can send in a question. Then it goes to Marina, and Marina is a drill sergeant. Yep. She holds my feet to the fire and makes sure that I answer your questions when I say that I'm going to answer them. So she is so much more with it than I am. It's a great way of getting your question answered. I'm just going to tell you, because Marina will find me if I don't. She literally will hunt me down and find me. So we have a couple of those questions, but we're also starting to take live questions already in the chat. Whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, that's all available to you from whatever the site is there. So I'm going to go ahead and start with one motor question, and then it's open to every kind of question. There is no limit. I do have to give the disclaimer that there is no expert in any field, but especially in autism, that can give individually specific advice in this format. It's not fair to the person that's, talking, and it's also not fair to the person being talked about, because obviously Evelyn doesn't have eyes on that individual child. Yes. So what she's going to do, you're going to write in with your question and be as specific as possible. You're going to tell us where you live in the world, because sometimes that's an important part of this, yes. Right? What resources might be available to you. And then Evelyn will give you a wonderful topic of maybe more questions.
Yes.
Right.
I always have lots of questions.
Right. But then the hope is to have you have questions to go back to the people who do have eyes on the situation. Yes. So just so that we're all clear about that. All right. My first question that was sent in to us about motor skills, and let's keep in mind that motor skills can be fine motor skills or gross motor skills.
And even more.
Well, there's, what is there? There's the eye. Yeah. What do you call that? Ocular?
Ocular motility and just visual motor.
Yes.
Which is a lot of what the questions usually come in.
Okay. And then there's oral motor.
And there's oral motor.
Yep. I mean, there's so many things here that we can talk about. But somebody wrote in and said, my son is 8 and having so much difficulty with writing, the actual doing of it. He can tell you what he wants to write, but something is lost from brain to hand. That's so interesting. What would you recommend we work on this summer? This is kismet.
Yes, because, so this is a common question.
Yes.
At the very basic level, all those little toys that little babies are playing with, push buttons and all that. Yeah. That's all basic development of fine motor skills. Learning how to turn the knobs and push and everything. So a lot of times people will talk about strength. They're writing, but it's really like the loose grasp and they can't hold a pencil. So there's that level of just development. And do they use their fingers to button their clothes, to do all those, holding their toothbrush and their spoons and everything at the right level? Are they using actually their fingers? Because so many of our kids will compensate.
Yes.
It's too hard to use their fingers, so they're using their whole hand grasp, which is a lot easier. Yeah. So there's that level. But if your child knows what he wants to say, but it's just hard to put on paper, one of the first things I'm going to say is, especially for an 8-year-old, is to go get a developmental vision assessment. Yeah. And you want to go to someone who actually specializes in kids with learning disabilities and really knows the population, whether it's ADHD or dyslexia or autism, whatever it may be. Because so many times there's actually a visual function that is not happening, whether it's their eyes not working together, just a half millisecond off, and what you see will be blurred, or what you write is just doesn't look like what it's supposed to be. But go and get just a full developmental vision assessment so that you can see if there's anything missing. Yeah. Is it a vision issue? Is it a perceptual issue, a depth perception? There's so many parts of it. And then there's the visual motor, being able to actually hold a pencil and be able to write, and, there are things that you can help that can really help. So many times, vision therapy is not covered on many levels because it's actually a medical insurance thing, but you can do it the homework way, where you go and they tell you the 3 exercises to do it, and you do it for a week or 2, and then you go back and then they give you more. And sometimes, it's 8 years old, and sometimes the amount of writing that's needed just can't catch up. But we're in a world now where technology actually fulfills. Yeah. So if that child needs to have laptop and learn how to type, that it sometimes decreases the frustration so much more, where you're able to, almost every PDF now can be manipulated, where a child can go in and learn how to type on a PDF. And for math, you do need to write, but then there's a lot of accommodations in your school where you can do all your math on, graph paper. So all the columns stay in the right place. Yeah. There's a lot of accommodations now where you can go that way. But the first thing I would say is if your child knows what he writes, but is having trouble with motor, go get that developmental vision, because a lot of times it is that ability. If they can't really see the paper, or it's all wig-wagged and it's jumping, and it's really hard to write.
And the funny thing about this, and I didn't think about this before, but I met you when Jem had just turned 8.
Yeah.
And you and I started having a conversation, and you said this to me, because I was saying, we're struggling with this, that, and the other thing. And you said, go and get the developmental, and you sent us to Dr. Larry out in Calabasas. And it was transformative. Yeah. I remember, and I thought, how is this going to go? How is this guy even going to be able to evaluate? And I'll be honest, I don't think he could have done it when Jem was 6. Mm-hmm. Do you know? But at 8, he could. He was really good too. You gave him a good referral.
He's really good with spoken, but this is the issue across the country. Is a lot of times there are these optometrists, but they don't know how to assess our nonverbal kids.
Yeah.
I do know some people who can do the nonverbal, and it's pretty amazing to watch for the kids that have motor skills. But, the nonverbal kids are hard to assess. A lot of times it's the experience of the person.
Yeah.
I always say it's like walking into a storage room, because they'll watch the child walk in and see if they avoid things, if they step over things, or do they just like walk over everything. And through that and the experience of the person, they're able to see like, oh, he has some depth perception issues, or he has, these other issues. But yeah, it is much harder when the kids are nonverbal. But I always say that if you have a child who's verbal, go and try to like emergency learn. Yeah. Like all the words like blurry and, like all these words that will be used in a vision assessment. And then they'll be able to tell the doctor, oh, my eyes are jumping, or like the words are wavy and things like that. So you do want to teach your child some of that language, so that that whoever assesses them actually gets the information.
We learned so much. And I remember the doctor showing me an exercise that he was doing with my son, where he had a stick with a gold ball and a stick with a silver ball. And he was making them move, and he was asking my son to track them, and when could he see it, going to the side, and when could he see it. And when he would get anywhere that was not directly in the middle, and my son would have to be moving his eye to watch it, you could watch his eye vibrate because the muscle couldn't hold it. Yeah. And he said, Mom, are you watching this? This is how hard he is working because he could read at 8, and he was a pretty good reader. And he was like, I can't even imagine how hard he's having to work because in his field of vision, when he gets here, it starts to shake. He gave us exercises. We had a choice. We could either drive to his office every day for like 2 months, or we could buy this machine that looked like it was from Star Wars. We bought the machine. And he did the exercises, and it made all the difference.
And every child is different, so you can't just like go buy this machine. You have to see what's there.
No.
I had a typical child whose just eyes would tire out. Yeah. And the focus of being able to work together. Yeah. So they just gave her these lenses that just kind of made it easier for her eyes, and then suddenly she went from reading 20 minutes to an hour.
Isn't that amazing?
And it was just like school was not a problem. And those are the kids who in the morning can read the board and are fine, but in the afternoon they look really ADHD. Yeah. It's because their eyes are really tired, and they just don't know how to tell you. Yeah. And that's a typical child. So.
And so I just want to say to this parent, writing is still not my son's forte. Mm-hmm. Nor was it my dad's. Every single male in our family has writing akin to chicken scratch that no one but them can read. I know doctors that have terrible writing.
Very terrible.
The place that we ran into was when he couldn't read his own notes and when the teacher couldn't read his notes. But as soon as we moved to keyboarding, his grades and what he learned, and he found out that he was a writer once he could keyboard. Yep. And, so life goes on. Yep. I remember one of the aides saying to us, but we need to, and we continued to work on the writing. We did. He still
have to fill out forms.
Right. But I remember the aide who said, well, he's not going to be able to fill out job applications. And I looked at her and I said, he's not going to apply for jobs where he has to fill out an application. Yeah. And she was like, oh. So, that's come back to haunt me a couple of times. But, you kind of try to make it work however you can. I want to get to some of the questions that are coming in live. Taryn wrote in right at the start of the show. She said, hi, ladies. How do you know your ASD child is ready for kindergarten? What a great question.
In the past, I have two questions for this because it obviously depends where your child is at. What kind of skills. If he's the child who you think can go through typical general ed, you're going to give him the luxury of that extra year and a half and start him at school like at 6 until they tell you have to start. If you feel like there are going to be issues and, the professionals around you say there's a lot of skills that, just are really difficult, but he needs to start school. You want to do what he's ready for. Just know that in most states, kindergarten isn't mandated to 6. And if typical kids have the luxury of waiting and getting just really good preschool education, give it to our kids. Give it to our kids with autism. If they will learn more in the one-to-one intervention many times, because one-to-one intervention is very much just intensive tutoring. And we all know that, for all of us that have had, anytime somebody is looking at how you learn and what you're learning and specifies things for what you need, you're going to learn a lot more. And so I always say, yes, try to figure out what that goal is with all the professionals around you. But if school isn't mandated to 6, don't rush it. Yeah. Typical kids don't have to rush it. We don't want to rush a child who has a learning disability.
I think the thing is that we all have this inner need. We want to feel normal on one day ever. As parents, can it feel normal? Can it feel normal for them? Can it look normal? And I think sometimes we do ourselves and our kids a disservice by wanting it to be that normal that we're chasing that doesn't really even exist, by the way. Normal is a setting on the dryer.
That's so true.
And that's all that it is. But for me, it was Gymboree that I was like, oh, why can't we go to Gymboree like everybody else? But I hear so many people who are like, well, we want to do school because school is the normal thing. The thing that's hard for me is that when I think of our kids on the spectrum, and they're all different, they're all 100% different, but we know that if they've gotten an ASD diagnosis, we know that there's a communication issue.
Yes.
We know that there's a social issue.
We know that learning is not typical.
There we go.
That's the whole purpose, let's say, of ABA or any kind of intervention really is to try to figure out how does this person with autism learn?
Yeah.
And if you can figure out what it is, then you start teaching them everything through that tunnel or, that method. And then your child's going to start learning.
Yeah.
It's just that he's not learning typical. And I think, public school systems are made for that middle norm.
They really are.
And if your child is above or below, it's really hard to learn.
And it's cutthroat.
Yes.
The other kids are not nice. Yeah. We all would like to think that it's all, that we have that picture in our head of kindergarten and we have maybe a memory of a wonderful day in kindergarten for ourselves. And we all think, oh, it's so lovely and the kids are all nice. It just isn't. If you can't keep up, it isn't that happy picture.
I agree. And I always say you don't want to put your child in until they're as ready as they can be because you want it to be a good experience.
Exactly.
You want that good memory. When you put kids in and they're not ready, their experiences can be really bad. And unfortunately, a lot of them can't talk about it.
Yeah.
They can't talk about I'm going and I'm sitting over here because all those kids are just way too loud and spontaneous for me.
And the thing for all of us is whatever the experience we're having until we know that other people have a different experience, that becomes the norm to us. And what I always say is you would never take your little kid and put them on the expert ski slope without lessons first. And school is the expert ski slope. So I'm with Ev. Give them as much opportunity.
Give them time. They have the luxury of time. There is going to be a point where your child has to be in school.
Yeah.
And there's the good parts and there's the parts where you're like, I wish I could just have that break.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Absolutely. Andrea has written, and this is going to make me cry, Ev. She says, hi, Evelyn. I don't know if you remember me, but you took time out of your day over a year ago to meet with me and my husband at a coffee shop to help us figure out all our questions to our son. She said, we appreciated you doing that so much. You are amazing. And I know what that means to a parent, that you did that.
I love this family. I remember her. I remember you, Andrea.
She says, my son is 4.5 years old. He is verbal, full-time ABA. My question is, he does not get out of his bed until he is told that he can, which I know is a wonderful thing. But the problem is, if he is sick or he gets sick, he does not get out of bed. He does not come get me. He will sit in bed and vomit all night until I see him in the morning. Is there anything I can do about this? We're sending you a hug.
Oh, Andrea. I've thought about you and your son a lot over the year. The last 2 years. And, he's very rule bound. And you can give the exception. Like if you feel sick, if you feel hurt, and you have to be a little bit more concrete with him probably. Like if your tummy's not bad or if your bed's wet and you don't know why. So very concrete things you need to come find mom and dad. You can get out of bed and do these things, but make it really concrete for him. So let's say he spills water on his bed. You're still going to want him to come get you. Yeah. It's not just sickness. It's if something happens that's not supposed to happen. So if you can be really concrete and just describe, if he hasn't been working on any kind of private events, like tummy feeling sick or just ow, that's because private events are so abstract, which when I say private events, it's all those things that we physically feel that nobody else knows. And they just see by our reaction that you're cold, you're hot, you're hungry, or whatever it may be. But I always say that what should be in his program full time for every child, regardless of functioning, is when they are sick, you're going to take that moment and have them tact whatever it is to identify. So if they have a sore throat and they have sore throat and the doctor's already confirmed that they have a sore throat, you're going to, during that period that he has a sore throat, you're going to say, ow, like my throat hurts, whatever version that they're able. If they have a device, you're going to be pushing that ow button and pointing at whatever hurts.
Making it clear.
Yeah. And you do it a lot because you have to capture it when it actually is hurting.
Yeah.
And you should be capturing it 1,000 times a day because it's hopefully not that long that they're hurting.
Right.
So that when that happens again, they have a way to communicate to you that they're hurting. And I think that if you can teach him the really, really concrete things about like, whether it's his stomach or his head or his throat. And if it doesn't feel right, if you feel sick, you need to come get mom and dad. If your bed is wet, if there's something on your bed that shouldn't be there, they have to come get you. He'll get it like that. It's not an issue.
Is this a thing where the bedtime pass would work?
A bedtime pass will work. You can put a little card if he needs that. If he was a letter and numbers child, so you could write and say, go get mommy. If this happens, and just something, a concrete reminder will tell him. Okay. He'll come get you.
I always think of the mom who was telling us on the show that the rule in their house was you don't get out of bed because they had worked so hard to get him to stay in bed, right? And then it was years later and they were having trouble with wetting the bed. And there was one night, it's 2:00 in the morning and you're just worn down and you're having to strip the bed and whatever. And in a moment of just tired and anger, she said, why won't you learn to just get up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom? And he looked at her and he said, I'm allowed to get up. And I thought I wasn't allowed to get out of bed. And she was like, I've made these rules and didn't take all these things into consideration.
Yeah, and that's why, like, if your child is at the point where they can have these conversations, I always tell the parents, you have to give yourself a way out because no rule is 100% ever.
That's right.
0. And we might give the initial rules to get the child compliant or to do some other things, but at a certain level, every rule has an exception.
Well, and if the smoke alarm goes off, you want him to get up out of bed, right? Yep. I mean, that's
Don't
serious.
Talk to strangers. If you're lost,
right.
You're going to go talk to a stranger.
Right.
There's so many exceptions. And Andrea, I'd say for your child, you should be building in exceptions already.
Okay.
Because he needs to know there are 10 other ways to do things. And that will make school easier in the future, but also his problem solving. When he gets into issues like this, like I'm not supposed to get out of bed, he should know you don't get out of bed except for you have to use the bathroom, you have to do this, you feel this way, he's scared, there has to be a time when he comes to get you.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing. And she said, thank you so much. I'm also saying hello to Nicholas, Nikyle, and Rodney, and Autism Journey with Elijah. Good morning, everybody. I hope that Elijah had a great birthday yesterday. We were saying happy birthday to Elijah yesterday. I saw the pictures. It looked like you guys had a great time. And you should never, ever have to apologize for having a good time.
Yes.
I just want to say that. Good time is always an amazing thing. Nikyle wrote in and said, how does this relate to motor planning? And I believe it was when we were talking about the ocular motor.
Okay.
So maybe if you could talk about how, because that would impact. If you are having trouble ocular-wise, it does affect your motor planning.
Well, there's all these ways you can answer about motor planning, but my thing is in global development, it's always gross motor, fine motor, oral motor.
Okay.
Okay. And the vision is probably along the fine and oral motor level. So many of our kids come in with global, the motor planning issues. And I always say one of the things that doctors have told me, or physical therapists, says you have to warm them up.
Oh.
So a lot of my kids, I will say, like, when you get up in the morning, let's go jump on the trampoline.
Yeah.
Let's do some active gross motor running and skateboarding or bicycling, whatever it is that they can do. And then go and have to go sit in the classroom.
Yeah.
And always the writing is a little bit easier. All the motor planning along that. It may still be hard, but it does improve. So I always say if your child doesn't warm up now, they should warm up.
Yeah.
And sometimes that gets caught up into the sensory aspect of things, where also OTs who specialize in sensory integration will say, let's do a sensory diet to wake up your whole neurological system.
Yeah.
And it's kind of along the same lines. It's like, yes, if your child has lots of sensory issues, you wake up and you do all these activities to try to get it going and to try to make your body remember how to work together. And that will come together in the motor planning. There are issues with motor planning. So a lot of times if you can warm them up and then you can make the proper accommodations, whether it's the ability to write bigger, larger pieces of paper, the graph paper works amazing. Yeah. Teaching your child to use a highlighter to box in where they have to write is pretty amazing. Yeah. You don't think of it, but that highlighter, if you can teach your child how to remember where they're at and to cross out when they're done on math. So that if you're using a bright yellow, you do it and you cross it and you go to the next one, you'll know what you did.
Tricks.
There's lots of tricks out there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I want to get to one of the Marina questions because Marina will hunt me down and find me. Hi, my almost 3-year-old has been doing intensive ABA and seems to be learning quickly. However, the BCBA mentioned issues with working memory. Example, he often forgets to stay on task. Is this something ABA can resolve, or is there always going to be a deficit?
Well, first of all, he's only 2.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
For many people with autism, working memory is a weakness, and that has to do with the flexibility aspect. For those of you that don't know what working memory is, it's the ability, it's like your online memory. So if I'm sitting here with Shannon, I can remember back to 5 years ago when somebody asked a similar question. And then that's the working memory part. It's knowing where to put it, grabbing my online memory. Oh, this fits. Or the last time I saw Andrea, where that fits. And that's working memory. But at 2 years old, staying attention, a lot of 3-year-olds don't stay attention. 2 and 3-year-olds don't. But I would say it's a maintaining attention issue. And a lot of times at 2 or 3, it's still motivation based. There's a lot of does he not stay on task, but does he come back? Because that's the important part. A lot of our kids will go off task, but if they can redirect themselves back to task, then you're in a really good place. He's 2 and 3. There's a lot of 2 and 3-year-olds who aren't going to stay on task. They know to finish something. So I would actually say on this aspect, there's probably more of a motivation or reinforcement that you can give him that will help him to keep going. And you don't want to, it's like with eye contact. People always say, why do you work on eye contact? It becomes a staring contest. And it's the point is that you don't stare. None of us do that purposely. We look away, we check in, we think, we look back. And it's the same idea especially at 2 and 3. They can start something and get up and go, but then it's oh yeah, I was supposed to finish. And then they go back. Then that actually is very appropriate for their age. But I wouldn't worry about the working memory aspect. In my opinion, a lot of the working memory issues, which you can work on with our kids with ASD, has to do more with rigidity. I'm only supposed to do this at this time. So they only pull the information for that aspect. And then they get somebody new, and I don't have any experience with you, and they're not going in and pulling it. When really the real rule they should have learned was, no, when I see someone, I'm supposed to greet them, or I'm supposed to be doing this with them. And this applies to everyone, not just the one. So there's a lot of other issues that come into it, whether it's generalization of rules. Do they have the wording, the flexibility to know to go and problem solve and find in their working memory the thing that fits into whatever conversation or task they're working? There's a lot of different things that you can do to help as you go. But if he's 2 or 3, I actually wouldn't be worried right now.
There we go. It's so funny because everything you're saying mirrors. I'm doing a 30-day meditation thing because I'm not good at meditation. My brain goes constantly, and I end up beating myself up going, why am I so bad at this? And I'm doing this meditation that's working differently because it's teaching me that your mind will wander. Accept it. And then when you notice it, then you can come back to the home base so it's teaching my brain to be flexible enough to go, oh, look, now I'm thinking about this. That's okay. I can go back to breathing. Exactly. So that's fascinating. It mirrors exactly what you're talking about. Look who just wrote in. A certain Dr. Grampuchet just wrote in and said, just saying hello to Evelyn and want to thank her for covering for me.
You're welcome. And I hope you're having a great day.
Yes, we do. We were saying at the start of the show that you, more than anybody, occasionally deserves a break. So we hope that you're having a wonderful time with who we also love.
We love her.
So, because it's somebody's birthday, I'll say that. Happy birthday. Okay, so another Marina question we have to get to. We have a 4-year-old son with a 2-year-old diagnosis of autism level 3. Now, see, if Dr. Grampuchet were here, that would drive her nuts because you're supposed to have 2 numbers. He's nonverbal and seems to have a little receptive language. He's been getting about 10 to 15 hours a week of home-based ABA. My question is related to breastfeeding. He's still breastfeeding and sleeping with me, mom, and I am not sure how to wean him without him feeling rejected. He's very food selective and doesn't communicate hunger cues or bathroom cues, so I'm constantly asking and offering him food. He prefers to nurse. I am at a loss on how to increase his appetite so as to decrease and ultimately stop breastfeeding. Thank you for any help you can offer. I'm sending this mom a hug. So again, this is 4-year-old with a 2-year-old diagnosis of autism and only 1 number, level 3.
The level 3 makes me nuts too for different reasons than Dr. Dury.
Well, I mean, let's just be clear here. There is supposed to be 2 numbers. You paid for an assessment. You were supposed to get 2 numbers, and those 2 numbers are 2 very different things. And on a very basic level, how you would teach somebody, Dr. Grampuchet talks about this all the time. The former teacher in me loses my mind because you paid for the assessment as a parent. Why are they only giving 1 number? And they almost only ever are giving 1 number. So why does it drive you crazy?
It drives me, well, one thing is, who's giving the diagnosis?
Yeah.
Because half the time people just don't even know how to give a diagnosis.
Well, this is what I think we're all learning.
The training is very minimal.
Well,
and so that's unfortunate because, you know,
the expense of it isn't
the expense minimal. And the patient, that's one thing. But the other thing is, if you've seen a lot of people with autism, you've seen a lot of people with autism.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen very many when they're giving the level 3 or 2 or whatever it is, a lot of times it's a comparison pool.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen a lot, you're going to say 3 and maybe you've only seen level 1 people.
So don't get married to the number.
Don't get married to the number. Really focus on the deficits. What are they? Let's fix them. Yeah. Let's give them, you know, especially for this one, has had a 2-year diagnosis already. And that's amazing for that parent. You did a good job. Yes. You noticed really early and you got him in there and got the diagnosis for him when he was 2. I have to hit the 10 to 15 hour a week. It needs to be full time. It needs to be 30 to 40 hours. It cannot be 10 to 15 because even on all the studies, the 10 hour control, they didn't learn much with or without therapy. And since therapy is so expensive,
yes,
you don't.
It's unconscionable. Like my heart literally sank when I saw that 10 to 15 hours. Because I always give the comparison of penicillin. A doctor prescribes you penicillin, and we know from the studies how much penicillin it takes to treat what you have. And then, but if you only took half of it, what would happen? it could actually end up being a problem where it makes you resistant to the thing. 10 to 15 hours of ABA for somebody who was diagnosed at 2 is against all of the science.
And if you have issues with having a 40-hour program, the only reason 40 hours was chosen is a typical child is learning every waking moment of their day. And for your child, if your child's not learning every waking moment, they're falling behind.
Yeah.
And so the 40 or 30 hours is a replication of like trying to get your child to be learning the whole time they're awake.
Yeah.
And if you look at it that way, then it's not so bad. And the thing is, your ABA should be a lot of fun.
It should be.
So, and a lot of our kids actually prefer being in therapy because it's fun and structured and they get all these great reinforcers. And, you know, it is something where they're learning and they're able to communicate more. Yep. And they're just a lot happier once they get past, you know, they'll have issues, definitely, you know, but they really do, you know, that motivation that's built in, the reinforcement, it's got to be fun for them. And not all of it will be, but there should be that light in the middle of it. So if you're feeling bad about having 40 hours, you know, it's just really the replication of trying to get your child to be learning the whole time they're awake.
That's right.
But getting on to the breastfeeding. So one of the things that happens with our kids is, you know, we talked about rigidity today already. And a lot of times things just become routine, you know, and all of us, if we have something that's really comforting, we want to go along that routine. But the thing is we do, you know, we have to move on. And developmentally, it's important because he needs to be eating food because we talked about oral motor exercises earlier. Mm-hmm. That food is oral motor exercise. Being able to chew, being able to use that tongue is really a part, and being able to like really get through food and develop those muscles helps speech later on, you know? So what I would do is I would probably shorten the time period. It's like if you're nursing for, you know, 20 minutes right now, I would slow every day or every 2 days, start decreasing the minutes and then following it up with food. Okay. You know, and the favorite foods, nothing that's difficult to eat, nothing that's just good for him. Yeah. But just like something that he finds favorable already. And I would start to decrease the amount and then be giving this other food after, just supplementing. And he doesn't have to eat a lot of it. It's just the path of I nurse, I get this food that I like. And it's a reinforcement, but also it's nourishing to some degree. Yeah. And so you start to decrease the amount of time and start increasing the amount of food that you're adding. And hopefully you'll be able to get off where, you know, the kid's going to get hungry. Hopefully you're saying that he doesn't feed or he doesn't ask. Asking and being hungry is total different things. A lot of our kids actually don't feel hunger. We talked about private events earlier. Yeah. You know, they just don't feel hunger, but they have to actually learn, have the opportunity to be hungry too. Yeah. You know, so a lot of times we'll just keep feeding kids with the grazers through the day and you never really get hungry. At least when I do that, I'm never hungry through the day. And usually my meals aren't as good. Yeah. But if you're giving the opportunity to let hunger develop, and then feeding and not just giving into the breastfeeding too. There's a lot of things that you can do if your child's, you know, doesn't understand time yet. Bring out the visual timer so he can see and the red disappearing when, you know, it knows that this is how long you can be feeding for, and being able to give him an idea of when it's over, but increasing that amount of foods too, and work with somebody, whether it's a BCBA, to figure out the levels of type of food that he's interested in. And then, but also a lot of times the kids who are nursing a lot, so many have I seen them, they don't chew. So eating is actually hard. Yeah. And if you have a child whose oral motor is very difficult or there are issues, you know, work with that eating specialist, that OT, that speech person, whoever it is to help with all the motor skills. Because if eating is hard, I'm going to choose breastfeeding too. Yeah. You know, that's just kind of where it goes. But you have to be building those skills alongside, separately, not when you're trying to wean off. Yeah. There's also another element, though, to breastfeeding. It's that closeness. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was a breastfeeding mom, and I found it very difficult. And he was weaned by 4, but not much before 4. And everybody was giving me a ration and you know what about, you know, what, you know, like breastfeed him when he's in kindergarten. Like people get so judgy about the whole thing. But there is this closeness with your child and it's hard. I loved it. I hated the full first 6 months of it. I wanted to run screaming with my hair on fire because you have to sit still and I'm not good at sitting still. We all know this about me. And it was like, oh my goodness.
There was also another thing that was going on for us with breastfeeding that, the whole thing about breastfeeding is you're supposed to make eye contact with your baby. But they told me not to, because every time I made eye contact, he stopped nursing. And he was losing weight, and they were like, stop making eye contact with him, which is bad.
Yeah,
they should not have said that to me.
They should not.
But anyway, but there was the closeness, and he and I had that closeness, and I for one did not want to lose that. But as we started to wean, we found other ways to find that closeness, like when we were reading together and he would sit underneath my arm. And every time, until he was old enough that I couldn't do it, every single time that I would put him into a shopping cart or take him out of the car, I would hold him for like 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I would smell his head and be like, oh, because there's going to come a time in a day. And this young man who is, towers over me and is going to be 21
I saw
in a couple of days, right? I knew there was going to be a day and a time when I wasn't going to be able to pick him up anymore. So I'm just saying, mom to mom, find the ways that you can have the physical closeness for you and for him as well. So that part, because I know you said I don't want him to feel rejected. So find the way, and it's got to look different for everybody, right?
Yeah. And this actually turns into, I always tell all the families I've been working with, find your 5 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever it is with the child, and just sit there and be all eyes on each other. Like just really try hard. And your child might not sit long, but it's okay. Yeah. There's no demands, no anything, just having that time of being together. When you first come home, if the child's like running after you, to be carried or whatever it may be, it's just like, let's sit on the couch together and give me my moment.
Yeah.
And be off, the phone's gone, and just to spend that time. And I mean, both sides, even our kids who don't like physical touch want that time with the parent.
Yep.
They want the attention. It might not be the way that you picture it.
Yes, that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
But it's the time that's spent doing, being together.
Amazing. Okay, another Marina question, but you guys can be writing in questions too. Hi, thank you for all the support. They've been watching Ask Dr. Doreen on YouTube forever. Grateful, and you're always in my prayers. I have a question. My son, 6 years, he has good manding, but not asking questions yet. Do you have any tips to teach manding for info? I've got skills, wonderful, thrilled for you, but I need help. I want him to expand his language. He can speak more, but he doesn't have the motivation to do so. And when it comes to factual things, he doesn't understand and cannot answer on it. For example, best friend, favorite color, what's dad's car?
Okay. So there's lots of things here.
Yeah, there sure are.
I mean, congratulations if he's manding, and is really good at it, because that's the first step of communication.
Yeah, it's like the first exit on the train, but there's much more.
Yeah, there's so much more. And to get to the exit with asking questions and being curious enough, he has to have a good command of basic language skills. He has to be able to go through, you said you have skills, so being able to understand actions and prepositions and attributes and all these things that are related, so that he can put together the language to ask, but also so he can understand what's being told to him.
Yeah.
Because there's so much language involved. There's the curiosity of the question. Getting to curiosity is probably going to be a little bit more delayed, but since he's manding, you can build it in too. Yeah. Into his manding, learning language, learning to say, like, not just like, I want the car, or can I have the car? It's, I want the big red car, or I want the small, so it's, I want the car on the shelf. And so you're going to build in language through his manding. And then at some point, the pragmatic part will kick in, where it's not just all want, it's can I have? And you're going to take advantage of his ability to mand and form those into questions before you get into WH questions and all information. Manding for information, usually if you're asking for things information-wise, the response is all information. And if your child doesn't have a good command of understanding language, then it doesn't mean anything to him right now. And that's important to remember, that if the response back has no meaning, he's just not going to do it, because none of us will. If I asked you something and you responded to me in French and I didn't understand any French, I would just be like, okay, I would just keep moving on, like if you're not going to actually explain it to me, I'm just going to keep moving on to my next thing. And so, Dr. Durham-Pichet talks about being dropped in the middle of Hong Kong and like not speaking. And at some point, if somebody slows down for you, you do focus. But if nobody slows down for you and just keeps talking, you're just going to leave. You just go about your own things and what you're doing, and you're not asking more. And then you ask a lot about when can he, answer factual questions and things like that. Best friend, favorite color. There's a lot of issues in there because it's not just factual. A best friend is understanding what a relationship is. Yeah. And then there's friend and acquaintance and best friend. And a lot of our kids on the spectrum have really a lot of difficulty understanding the concept of best versus just a friend.
Or even favorite.
Or favorite, yeah. Our kids with autism do not like the word favorite. They either like it or they don't. Yeah. And so they have to learn that all the language for in between first before they can choose those extremes, being able to understand like there's a difference between a friend and an acquaintance, or just a classmate, how much you know about them. And, when does this person become best, and understanding the emotions involved in all of that too. So that's a little farther down the line. But you can start with factual information, like even the name of the car. You can point at the back of the car and say, these are the words, and this is this car. Yeah. And most cars have this on the back, and being able to identify that aspect. But I'd say really, especially if he's 6 right now, you really need to work on the language expansion, the fluency. So not just the receptive understanding, but how fast can that child pull out a word? And I think a lot of ABA programs actually don't work on the fluency aspect. So it's really hard for our kids to talk because they have to sit there and think for every single word. And then by that time, another 6-year-old's already gone. Yeah. Because it takes so long to pull out the language, and 6-year-olds aren't good about paying attention. So they're off to something else. And so it's like spend this time working on the language. And you can start just by describing all of his favorite things. And it has to be receptive and expressive. So hearing and understanding, but also finding the words to ask for all those things that he really loves. Yeah. And putting all the descriptors and the feature names and, just everything in there. And you'll see as he's expanding his language that way, you'll flow probably into the information the way he wants it to, not the way we want to. Because we talk about best friends and cars and things like this. But maybe that child is really interested in trains or airplanes or whatever the concept is. The other day, a child came up to me and at one of our centers, and he's like, do presidents have parties? And I looked at him and I was like, nice to meet you. What's your name? And then it was really funny because then I said, well, what do you think? What kind of parties do you go to? And then he looked at me and he goes, I'm not talking about celebratory parties. I'm talking about political parties.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And because that was his favorite. That was his thing. And he was 7. And I just looked at him and I said, oh, so you like, this is what you're interested in? And I said, but you know what? Can you just can you answer my question first? Yeah. Does George Washington, did he have a birthday party like you did? And he was just looking, he goes, no. And I just waited and I looked at him. I said, think more. And he was like, he had to go through the definition of what a birthday was. Right. And everything. And he goes, yes, but not like mine. And then, but I was trying to get him to describe and it was really interesting, right? Yes. But that was his thing. And then I was getting him to talk more on the social end of all the presidents. Yeah. And he was just like, this is not what I expected. Right. But it was really great just to I was trying to get him to use his words, and he was having trouble finding those words for the fun things, or really it was the social things. Right. He had read a lot and he had so much information, was so smart on so many levels, but just getting him to talk on the social end of things, it slowed him down. Yeah. He had to find those words and pull out things. And so, that's what we were talking about, with his parents, about you want to bring the social aspect into all of these things that he's interested in. Yeah. And, it took him a little longer. He's a smart little boy, but it was just he had to word find, and it was a different type of words that he had to find.
Fascinating. So, Nikyle, and I hope I'm saying your name right, wants to know, does the pragmatic always develop if they have the manding?
You have to actually, with all the language learning, you do have to shape it. You do have to go in and teach them. Yeah. We want, the parents usually they get tired of hearing I want. Yeah. They just get really tired of it. So we start teaching the child different ways to say I want. That isn't, because once you get into school, it can be rude if a child's going up to somebody and saying, I want, the red crayon.
Yeah.
They want it to be more appropriate and socially, all the manners part of it. So usually that's where we shape it, is where like when you should be able to ask the parent, or the teacher, can I have the red crayon now? Yeah. Instead of just saying, I want the red crayon. And so a lot of times you do have to teach that aspect, because remember, our kids like routines. Yeah. So if you only teach them one way to say something, a lot of times they just stick to it because that's what they know and that's what feels good. Yeah. What's familiar. And so you have to teach those other aspects. And when you start teaching the other aspects, a lot of times it fits right into, just societal norms more than anything. Adding the please and the thank yous and, all of that and when you're young, it's really important for other parents, people at school, wherever you're at, even like other family members, aunts and uncles and grandmas want the please and the thank yous.
Yes.
Very much.
It's currency.
Yes, it is. It's currency. And you're learning how, and so you're going to be teaching those other types of pragmatic language. And the kids actually figure it out after a while. Like even I had a kid who's pretty much nonverbal and was only manding. And at some point he figured out that he actually got more when he said it different ways. Yeah. So then he would start like what we would call like, all the indirect mans. But he realized indirect mans actually got him his pizza faster than if he said, I want pizza.
Interesting.
If he just went up to people and said, I really love pizza. Someone would give him some.
There we go. So. Fascinating. Okay, I've got one more Marina question, and we've got a little bit more time. I don't know, but if you have a question, you better write it in now. Somebody wrote in and said, I was referred by a friend who has a son with ASD. My little brother, who's 18 years old, has Down syndrome and was recently diagnosed last year with ASD as well. Although he is on medication, it does not seem to be helping. He is physically abusive towards my mom, who has a mental health condition and is on treatment. I just want my brother to live a somewhat normal life around people like him where he can play, learn, etc. Please help with anything you can. I'm desperate. This Mother's Day weekend, he beat my mom, was released from the hospital yesterday, and I'm just scared of it happening again. I don't know what else to do. My mom is struggling a lot. She recently was evicted from one place and just moved elsewhere. She is trying to get her life together, but every time something goes right, 10 things go wrong. Please, and they left an email, but I know that Marina reached out to let them know we were going to be answering their question today on the show. It's a hard one. I don't know that anybody has a one answer thing, right? And I first of all, if you are watching, it would help us so much to know where you are in the world, because resources are different in different places. So if you are watching, let us know where. And if you're going to watch it later on, because a lot of times people do or listen to it later on, you can still write to me. You can write to Shannon at autism-live.com and let me know a little bit more about where you are, because that will help inform. But
where and what kind of support? Like when I first looked at this question, I was telling Shannon, I just have 1,000 questions.
Yeah.
Because where are you? What level? What led to the diagnosis of ASD at 18? Yeah. There's really something specific that could probably happened. Yeah. Where you realized he didn't have the understanding and it was beyond the Down syndrome. Yeah. Down's kids, I always love Down's kids so much because they're just so happy. They're just usually really happy and just, they're interested in whatever they're interested in. Yeah. But they don't have like the perceptive part where they're stuck on things, but they just like what they like. But there's a limit to learning. Okay. Unlike with our kids with ASD, when it's just ASD, I always walk in and say, there's no limit to your learning. We just have to figure out how you learn.
Great point.
That's the difference. And the thing is, you're saying that your mom also has mental health issues. So that means that will play a part of this. Yeah. Because if, depending on what she has and how her ability to problem solve and how her ability is to get support in the areas she needs, that will all play into how to help this whole situation. Because you said that he's on medication, but it's not helping. Well, what is the medication for? Because really, there's not really there is one medication that people with autism are recommended for, but it's not for everybody. And it is for aggression, a lot of times, but there isn't like one thing for everybody on the spectrum. And so it's important, like, what is that medication for? It might not be for anything to do with autism.
Yeah.
You don't know. And we can't take that for granted. It's really going in and trying to find out, like, what is that for? How long has he been on it? Is there really no change? Or was there, a lot of times it's hard to keep going back to a doctor to titer to get it to the right level.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of support that this mom needs along that level of medication, somebody to go with her and understand like how this medication is affecting him, and whether you're increasing, decreasing, or you're changing to something else. It really is like, what is the purpose? But also like in terms of a lot of times language, a lot of times our ASD friends, they're having these behaviors because they don't know how to communicate.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Really, they just don't know how to say what they need, what they want. And I would really look here and just be like, does he have those basic needs?
Yeah.
Can he vocalize or in some way communicate when he wants food, or when he wants to go somewhere, or when he wants certain people or activities? You really need to get those things in place. And, we talked about manding, but is he able to mand for those things? And let's say he's 18, so maybe his language is a lot higher.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it is, and maybe he's the one that is manding for information, going and wanting to know, like, don't tell me later, but when are we going to go eat? Or when are we going to go to Disneyland? Whatever it may be. And, unfortunately in our society, we'll say later, but later sometimes it's 2 minutes, and later sometimes next year. And that kind of uncertainty, it's so hard for anybody on the spectrum. Yeah. And a lot of times for Down syndrome too. If they don't know when something's going to happen and they're waiting, they get to a point where they're just frustrated. And then, that's when all the challenging behaviors start. There's a lot of questions along that. Your mom's getting beat up.
Yeah.
She needs support. You need to find 100%. If there's a social worker involved, and getting that social worker to check in and getting her the respite for him, to caring for him, getting just the really basic needs of, like, there's some kind of communication issue. Maybe she's not understanding everything that's happening too, and not seeing the difference. And for, so there's a lot of support that is needed on both ends. And I wish I could give you one way and one solution, but right now it really is like they have you. And, thank you for writing in, and thank you for caring. And they're going to need somebody like you to find supports for, your brother, but also for your mom. And making sure there's people in there to help and asking the right questions.
Absolutely.
You see medical professionals, but a lot of times they have their 20 minutes, they're in and out.
Yeah.
And you don't even have time to ask, even if you have all of your abilities.
Yeah.
So learning how to somebody to go with her and to ask those questions and to find the support and to figure the planning part of how to make the help happen. Because too many times everybody's overworked at this level, even the social workers, and you'll get dropped off. And you need somebody to be assertive and to be the advocate for your mom and for your brother.
Yeah. And I have to say, when we're at the point where somebody's being beaten up and there's a hospitalization, we're past the time of talking about, should we get help? You're totally there. Yes. Your mom needs support and needs it right away. And sometimes working the system isn't right away, but I don't want to leave it off the table that sometimes, I know we all have this built-in fear about when a child is removed from the home, because we believe that every place that they go to is terrible, because there were places that were, and there are probably places that still are. But there are some amazing places now.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing hospitalization programs where they take the person out of the environment, work on some things, get them stabilized, and then bring them back to the environment.
Yes.
So don't be resistant if you find something like that, and if you're lucky enough that there isn't a huge waiting list. But yes, I agree with Ev that because you're the amazing brother and it sounds like you are outside, not living with them, if you can make some phone calls.
Yes.
I always encourage people, you can call 211 or in whatever your area is. Be very careful the words that you use, because they are very responsive. Very, very responsive. But once a decision is made, it's key as that person on the part of the family, but a little bit outside the equation. Keep an eye on things.
Yes.
I think often somebody says, okay, I'll fix it. We go, yay, but you have to keep monitoring it, whatever ends up happening. We're really out of time. But I want to say, Mikhail wrote in and said, I would love to hear more about the diets you tried, Shannon. I remember an episode where you talked about limiting fruit. Oh my gosh, we went through so many diets, and we've done whole shows about this. But I will tell you that while we were waiting to get the diagnosis, I heard from somebody about, I don't remember. We did one first and then the other. I think it was we did gluten first, and I didn't know what gluten was. I'm reactive to wheat. And so they were saying, well, there's the gluten-free diet. And it was the person who was evaluating him for OT. And I was like, what's gluten? Because I didn't even know, because I don't eat wheat. And she explained, I was like, oh, I'm allergic to wheat. And so we immediately pulled wheat out of his diet. And then a week later, I think that was the progression of it. Somebody said, oh, well, it's not just gluten-free, it's dairy-free. So then we took the dairy out, and we saw, and this is not everybody's case.
Yeah.
It is not everybody, but for us, it was huge. It was night and day different. Tantrums were decreased, and he was adding language every day that he had been losing every day in about a week. Now, some people, it's much later. With the gluten-free, casein-free, though, you got to really be gluten-free, casein-free. It can't be, well, we're gluten-free on the weekend. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's like, and even then when you start it, it's like 8 weeks before it's cleared your system or something, 6 to 8 weeks.
It's intensive.
It's really long.
But it's so much easier to do now than it ever was. My goodness, what's available in the grocery stores. Eventually, we did also then, we did specific carbohydrate for a while. We did a modified fine gold. I mean, we've done so many things along the way, but everybody's different.
Yes.
There are great books about diet, but we found the gluten-free, casein-free. My son is no longer gluten-free, casein-free, but mom still thinks maybe, but he's his own person. He gets to decide what he eats now. But I'm gluten-free, casein-free, and now I'm nightshade-free. Just put a fork in me. I'm all the way done. Anyway, so that's all the time we have but maybe we'll do another show about diet coming up soon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we get to have you next week too. Yeah. So what a wonderful thing. And we hope that you guys will tune in next week. I think next week our topic is executive functions. So, I know you only know everything about that.
No,
so
I love my EF. I love my EF kids.
Yes. So there we go. And Susie says thank you. So thank you all of you. Let me tell you what's happening the rest of this week. Tomorrow, we're having Matt Asner on the show, and he's going to be talking with us about the upcoming Ed Asner poker tournament that's on June 15th, and all the celebs that are going to be there. There's somebody that I was like, what? They're going to be there? This promises to be really wonderful. Then on Thursday and Friday in May, we're trying something different. We're doing best ofs. So Thursday is Best of Autism Live. We're doing a parent-to-parent talk that specifically is about this new phenomenon when your child is, the school says that even though they have an autism diagnosis, they don't qualify for an IEP. 2 categories when your child is going to school for the first time and they say, don't qualify for an IEP. And then there's the other category that's very new, which your child had the IEP and now suddenly they decided there's no educational benefit for your child. So we have 2 pathways to tell you what to do should this horrible thing happen to you. Then on Friday, it's Ask Dr. Doreen, the best of Ask Dr. Doreen, and the topic will be creating an educationally enriched environment in your everyday moment for your child, whether it's your car, your home, everywhere they are is an educationally enriched environment. It's a great talk. You won't want to miss that. And then we'll be back next week with all kinds of things. But tune in tomorrow because Matt Asner will be with us from the Ed Asner Family Center. And he's also going to talk about their academy, which is really wonderful. So tune in then. Thank you again. Thank you, all of you. We'll see you tomorrow. And until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.